Meanwhile, the surviving remnants of Luo Feng's group returned to their camp. Their leader Luo Feng himself was furious at the failed raid, and he knew who to direct his rage at. He threw all the blame for the failed raid and their heavy losses on the boy who was in charge of scouting and controlling the eagle. Luo Feng was sure that all their problems were because he had poorly scouted the route and pointed out a dangerous road to them. That was something he wasn't going to forgive. But the boy in all this didn't see his fault at all. He sobbed and assured him that everything was fine with the route map, and he didn't know what had gone wrong. It was probably just that the monsters had gotten smarter and had their own strategy and plans to lure and kill the hunters. Despite all his excuses to Luo Feng, it sounded like nonsense that he was not going to believe. Instead, he wanted to make him pay for all the mistakes that led to the deaths of his team members. By the way, if you haven't watched the previous episodes yet, please be sure to catch up on those first. Also, don't forget to subscribe. But luckily for the boy, he had a very beautiful sister who stood up for him in front of Luo Feng and convinced him that it was not worth killing and hurting her only little brother just because he had made a mistake once. It was only because of her and the fact that she was the leader of the mages in his group and had made many sacrifices for the sake of their group that Luo Feng agreed to spare him. But he warned that if it wasn't for her, he would definitely gouge his eyes out this time, so he should try harder next time. Or even his sister wouldn't be able to save him from his anger. The frightened boy was even grateful to the captain for that, because not many people got a second chance from him. Then he went to rest, not alone, and ordered the rest of the group to rest today to regain physical strength to depart again tomorrow. Some of his men could not resist talking about their commander's actions. To be continued, it was obvious to everyone that it was his mistake that had caused the losses, but no one dared to tell him openly. Instead, someone said quite loudly that Sarah had taken it up again today. Of course, she heard them and was quite annoyed by their behavior because her ex-boyfriend had heard them and it could turn out very badly. He was sitting nearby, cleaning his bow after the battle. His face was darker than night, and he could barely restrain himself from dealing with that bastard Luo Feng whom he hated so much. Meanwhile, under invisibility, Lin Tian was watching everything happening in the hunter's camp from above. He remembered that when he was still working for the company, he had looked at the files of Mage Sarah and Archer Chang. At that time it said that they were a couple, but now it seemed to have changed. It was probably because Chang had committed some crime and had to hide in the jungle, joining Luo Feng's gang of thug hunters. After the jungle was taken over by Shen Kuang technology, the government's jungle bill was never implemented, making the jungle and the world of the game, jungle survival, impossible. A great place for all kinds of criminals to escape punishment for their deeds. So the world of the game was filled with all kinds of bastards, who because of their violent nature, simply could not live in a normal world. They felt free to live here. After all, the law of the jungle was even more cruel than those criminals themselves. Lin Tian looked closely at this fellow Chang, remembering how pathetic he was, and was clearly a cuckold. Sarah was too free-spirited, and this fact our hero was going to use. The fact that Chang clearly hated Luo Feng and was now poisoning his arrows was very beneficial to Lin Tian. A little time passed and the moon rose high above the camp of hunters who were carelessly resting and having fun. It was midnight. The bastards sitting around the campfire were discussing what was happening in the neighboring tent and laughing without embarrassment. Meanwhile, Chang was lying far away from them, and obviously, he wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. He was too full of hatred. But that was not all. A couple of mushrooms quietly crept up to him, which began to emit hallucinogenic pheromones. Under their influence, Chang immediately began to imagine everything in the most vivid colors. Luo Feng and Sarah just could not bear it. But the hallucinations did not stop. Sarah, the one he loved and hated so much at the same time, kept appearing in front of his eyes. Who was now in the arms of another. Two cheerful mushrooms were responsible for all these hallucinations. One of them transmitted distant sounds and amplified them, and the second affected the victim's psyche and prevented her from distinguishing between reality and illusion. Our hero's plan was cunning and simple at the same time. Under the influence of these mushrooms, Chang had to do something stupid and do something that, in a normal state, he would never dare to do. And now Chang had finally lost his mind and was heading straight towards Luo Feng's tent. Just in time, on the other side, An army of goblins led by their general, Gull, was approaching, kicking up dust. However, the goblins had one major disadvantage: their stupidity. Even though Lin Tian showed them and explained the way, they were still too slow and could not arrive on time. Our hero's plan was to have all the actors arrive and wound one another, and then he himself would appear and finish them all off in one fell swoop. In Lin Tian's opinion, it was just perfect. And while everything went according to plan, Chang came closer and closer to the tent, and our hero mentally encouraged him to kill them as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the other hunters didn't understand what he was going to do. Is he really going to talk to the captain? But then why would he have his bow at the ready? Shang himself froze in front of the entrance to the tent. It seemed to him that there was the source of all the hall and darkness in this world. Fear awoke inside him, which was even stronger than his jealousy and thirst for revenge. He didn't understand what was wrong with him. How could he even dare to come here with the intention of killing the captain? Fear told him that he would simply be killed for it. That's when Lin Tian's plan went awry. All because of this scared asshole who was incapable of doing anything. As it turns out, this Chang had a very high level of mental toughness. And now our hero will have to come up with something else. Luo Feng saw that Chang was approaching his tent, but he knew very well what a coward he was, laughing at his indecision. Even though he was her ex-boyfriend, Sarah was worried about him and asked him not to laugh at him. And Luo Feng hurriedly assured her that he would not do anything to him, as long as he did not cause trouble and did not openly oppose him, as Chang was a talented guy and very useful to the group. This option suited Sarah, and she paid attention to Luo Feng's wound, which still hadn't completely healed. It turned out that the weapon that was used was enchanted, so it was not an easy task to heal it. Sarah was also involved in that battle and almost died. Luo Feng also still couldn't forget that battle. At that time, he thought it was just another ambush ordered by the company, but it turned out not to be so. The one they attacked was very intimidating in the fight. It was Lin Tian himself. Then he surprised Luo Feng by possessing the martial arts of a warrior, the stamina of a magician, and the agility of an assassin at the same time. Luo Feng had never met anyone like him before. Recalling how he worked for the company, he said that at first he was just an ordinary mercenary and pretended to be weak to avoid being sent on difficult missions. Unfortunately, he was assigned to one of the 9 groups to ambush Lin Tian. The fate of those groups was very unenviable. Only his group survived. But still, he was sure that it was fortunate that the mighty warrior Lin Tian had died. Otherwise, he would have become the most powerful creature in the jungle, and a very difficult opponent. Meanwhile, Lin Tian was the liveliest of the living and watched from above as Chang froze in place. And judging by what an indecisive coward he was, it was immediately clear why the girl had abandoned him. Even though this perfect plan to pit the hunters against each other had failed, it didn't really matter. The ghoul army would soon arrive at the camp, and they would definitely deal with those assholes. In the end, except for the bad luck with Chang, the operation could be considered a success. Soon, the shout of the sentries swept over the camp. Enemy attack. Luo Feng, who had only recently fallen asleep, jumped out of bed without realizing what was happening. As soon as he came out of the tent, he saw that the battle was already in full force. Goblins were already everywhere. He and Sarah immediately joined the fight, but he still didn't understand what was going on and why hadn't anyone raised the alarm earlier. Why such a mess in the ranks and formation of the hunters? What happened to the alert system for monsters approaching? Had it really been destroyed by the goblins? He had no idea that it was the work of the mushrooms. They had removed all the low-grade gems that were used by the hunters to create a magic circle around the camp to warn them of approaching monsters. Luo Feng had no idea how a stupid thing like a goblin could think of destroying the magic circle first before attacking. While Luo Feng was in shock and couldn't find answers to his questions, Ghoul Goblin General ordered all the other goblins to get out of his way. He was going to quickly finish off this hairless monkey Luo Feng in one blow. But the experienced hunter wasn't going to die so easily. So he used his axe to repel the attack. It was a battle between 2 berserkers who relied on brute force. But in strength, the Goblin General had a clear advantage, and Luo Feng quickly sensed this as his arms began to weaken and shake from the exertion. General Ghoul was not going to drag out the battle and swung once more to finish off his opponent. But Luo Feng was not going to fight a strong opponent. He had long forgotten what honor was and was willing to do anything to save his own skin. As he ran away, he shouted to the other hunters to help him and shoot the monster with their bows. However, the fighting hunters had bad news for him. The archer was not among them. Chang had left the camp just a few minutes before the attack. Luo Feng was still trying to escape from goal and was just furious that Chang dared to abandon the team. So he opened the system window to report this rascal's betrayal of the company. Meanwhile, Chang himself was nearby and watched the battle in the camp. Even he was surprised at how quickly the camp was attacked, but he was clearly not going to help them. He felt that after Sarah had left him, he had every right to do the same to them. Now what was happening there had nothing to do with him. Let those bastards burn alive. They deserved it, he thought. Chang decided it wasn't worth staying there for long and hurried to get away. But as soon as he entered the forest, he began to be pursued by the dark figure of our hero, who realized that Chang's level was still a bit high, as it was 2 more than his. However, the difference in level could be offset by cunning and surprise. Unfortunately, Chang's high level had unlocked one very useful passive skill, Keen Senses. Even before Lin Tian attacked, Chang sensed the monster's presence and became wary. Now he wouldn't be caught off guard, and thus this chapter draws to a close. Stay tuned to discover what unfolds next in the story. In the meantime, why not explore my other videos? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories. Your support means the world to me.